Hey, welcome to another episode of OTS Live. My name is Vin Blaine. As usual, today we're going to have a very special guest, interesting conversation coming up. And today we will delve into areas that we think it's important for our coaches in the Caribbean and the diaspora to know. Today we have no other than Marcus Dibernardo, and of course I have the name spelled wrong here. My bad. Apologies to Marcus when I get on. But Marcus is a interesting coach educator. I say that because I've spoken to Marcus before, and Marcus has his own way of thinking. Not that he's moving away from traditional norms, but he is open-minded. He doesn't mind you having an opinion, but he also is very opinionated and in a good way. He's not confrontational, but he has his own way of thinking and his own methodology. So he has the Dibernardo methodology that we're going to be talking about today, and other things to come on. Marcus, welcome to OTS Live.
Hey, thanks, Ben. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you, man. Marcus, I know I gave a little about you, but I know you are with Monroe College.
Yeah.
And for my listeners from Jamaica, it's not the same Monroe College that's in Jamaica.
No.
I know. So you're in New York, right?
We're in New York. Yes, we have a campus in the Bronx and a campus in New Rochelle, and I'm the head coach for the New Rochelle campus right there in New York.
Right. And you used to coach females at one point, right?
I coached the women's team. Through my coaching history, I straight out of college, I coached female club, male club, you name it. So yeah. I have coached in the NCAA at Central Connecticut State. And now I'm in a junior college, which is a 2-year athletic program compared to a 4. But our guys play for 2 years, and then they move on to a 4-year after that.
Okay. So how long were you at Monroe?
This is 13th season, I believe, at Monroe. And had a lot of Caribbean players over the years, been a lot of very good Caribbean players over the years. Team is very, very diverse with kids from all over the world. We've had kids sign pro. We had a kid sign a month ago with San Jose, George Asamani, a kid from Ghana, great player. So a lot of good things over the years at Monroe for sure.
Yeah, and before we start off, because we'll get in, I know you have some slides that we're going to be looking at, and some topics that I'm really, really fascinated with. Why Dibernardo methodology? Why the Dibernardo methodology?
Well, so for me, I grew up with the U.S. Soccer Federation, right, and started taking my licenses right after college with them. And, this has been a process of coaching education wasn't readily available when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And you had the Will Corver videos, you had a few books out, you had this and that. But to get really quality coaching education was hard. Mm-hmm. And, I had Tony Waiter's micro soccer, 3v3, 4v4, all that stuff. But even today, I felt like there was room for more. And me personally, I've worked on taking the best of what I've seen in, say, positional play models and what worked for me over the years. I've done a lot of research from the neuroscience behind athletics and sports to ecological psychology, which is a whole basically about how you gain intelligence in sports. So I put all that together into an easy to use, in my opinion, methodology. And, listen, I started not to love when I go to the soccer field and I see soccer practice and there's 14 different kinds of cones and 7 different lines, and it didn't even look like soccer to me. So I wanted to make a methodology that was really game-based. And that's really at the foundation of what my methodology is, because game-based means decisions on the ball instead of isolated drills and things of that nature.
So let me get to your presentations. I guess we can just go from there on, because there are some things here, Marcus, that has to do with your own explanations and ideas. So let us open. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's on there now. So this is just this one is just a short little breakdown, just so you know what the methodology is. I start off with small area possession type exercises where players are making decisions in very small areas to keep the ball. Then we go to medium area exercises, which can become more positional, and they can use keepers and goals. They don't have to. And then we go to the large area where it's more game model related with goals and goalkeepers, and it looks more like the real game. It is the real game. Then I put all my positional play principles into all 3 of those. So where I'm not sitting there and saying, here's how I'm going to teach positional play, the principles of positional play are in each and every exercise. And then I'm a big constraint-based training person, where constraints is basically how to – it comes down to this. If you give players absolute freedom in all your exercises, they end up solving problems the same way they always solve them. So if a kid is all left-footed and always solves the problem with his left foot, without constraints, he's just going to keep solving it the same way. So what happens is when you put constraints, now they have to figure out a new way to solve the problem in a game-based training, and therefore you're increasing their soccer intelligence. So I use constraints all the time in those 3 areas. So we can move on to that next slide.
Okay, let me get to the next slide here.
So here's what I'll say. The positional play, you're not going to find that in street soccer, right? So that's one of the reasons why I have formal positional play training in all my exercises. Unique skill sets, obviously, this is a big thing, unique skill sets. So different environments, street soccer brings those unique skill sets. And this is just general stuff about how players develop. So wherever you're born, if you're born playing futsal, if you're born playing beach soccer, whatever that environment is, the environment is responsible for creating these unique skill sets, right? It's not the coach teaching them that. Point blank, it's the environment. So, yeah. And so the next one, we go on to here we go. Yeah, this is so really when we look at like players' technique, right? And we look at, hey, we're going to produce these creative players and all this.
Right.
A lot when Cruyff says he didn't learn to play football at Ajax, he learned to play football on the street before he got to Ajax. That's where he learned his technique. Right. And I would say creativity-wise, you look at Neymar, right? He played futsal until he's 14. I've had players who only played beach soccer and futsal, didn't play 11 aside until they're 14, and they have these amazing skill sets, right? To think that you're going to create creative players with 2 practices a week, in my opinion, is not going to happen. I almost think it's a waste of time. And if we really want to look into where did top players, where do they really come from? They come from these unique environments. And we're going to talk a little later about Mesut Ozil growing up and playing cage soccer in Germany for 4 hours a day against his brother and his older brothers, and forcing that creativity. That's really where that's really where players are developed. Like we can't make any mistake about that. But the other part of this is, like, when you and I were growing up, Vin, I couldn't get on YouTube and watch how Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi, I couldn't analyze their moves. There was nothing. Now, this is a digital world with information at your fingertips. If players are ultra motivated and really passionate, even if they're not in that environment with like ultra competitive street soccer in Brazil, you could still figure out how to become a better technical player. You can't do the decision-making part on your own, though, but you can do some of the technical parts because of the information at your fingertips.
Yeah. Now, this is something I wanted to ask you about. I read this on the Big Five. I found it very interesting, Marcus. The Big Five is something that we can direct at coaches really directly. So let me explain the Big Five for me. It's there, but just give me your idea of what it's about.
So the first thing that you want to say to yourself is when a kid goes to the training session, whatever training session you put on, are they training to become more intelligent soccer players? And the only way that happens is if they're forced to make decisions on the ball in game representative, which means in somehow it represents the game. It's a real game. It doesn't have to be two goalkeepers with real nets. It could be possession game to end zones, whatever you want to do. It could be rondos, but are they making decisions, meaningful decisions? And in the possession exercises, the rondos, the kids are starting to learn how to exploit space and time. And that's not done in passing exercises. That's not learning to exploit space and time is done in possession rondo type of activities. Now, again, they have to be game representative. They have to be game based. Is the ball rolling 85% of the time? For me, this is key. Listen, this is the thing where the coach is this holy grail of knowledge, and they have to stop the game every 2 seconds and talk. And the real key here is set up a great learning environment, and then the kids learn from actually playing in that environment. That comes. I'm not going to say it's the only teacher. It's not. The coach can go ahead and put constraints in, change the rules, change the dynamics of the game. That part takes a highly skillful coach to keep that session progressing. But the reality is it's not the coach giving some lecture to the kids that's really going to pay off and make them smarter. No, for me, that's not it. In fact, cognitively to understand through language is very difficult compared to actually getting in there and doing it. So for me, like, especially with young kids, listen, 6, 7-year-olds, they don't want to go in the field and listen to you. They want to play.
That's right.
And when the kid comes off the field at the end of the training session, if they say, I always ask my son, do you want to go back next time? Do you want to come back tomorrow? If he says, yes, that was really fun today, it's because he played 85% of the time. The only time he never wanted to go back is when the coach talked and talked and talked.
No playing time.
Yeah, it's too much. Now, obviously, though, here's one of the things with my methodologies that's a little bit challenging sometimes is everything's a lot of work. So small area, medium area, large area. I mean, these are possession activities. These kids are working. And so sometimes the workload needs to be managed, right? And obviously, if you're training twice a week, it's no problem. But let's say for my college team, we go 6 days a week. The game's on Saturday. We really have to tone down what we do on Friday and Thursday's a medium session. So all that comes into effect. So that's a little bit of the Big Five right there. I think those are really important things to think about for any coach. Now this is what we, when I talk about street soccer, street soccer is for positional play. You don't learn in street soccer. That needs to be formal training, right? Maybe defensive organization is something a coach needs to do. Maybe, you don't see too much real quick, high tempo passing in street soccer. That's not quite there. Those are things that in formal training with me, those are things that we do. And that is a big part of my methodology. However, the street soccer part is massive. You cannot, so I think I have a slide in here. So the decision making's big, ball mastery, understanding time and space, all these things, 1v1. And there's something to unstructured play, Vin, that is so important.
Right
now, kids are so used to, hey, it's soccer practice. Coach is going to tell me to line up on the line. He's going to tell me how to do the warm-up. He's going to tell me what bib to put on, where to be on the field, what the objective is, the trick. Kids are like robots, right? But in unstructured play, in street soccer, the kids show up, they're in charge of making their own teams. They're in charge of making their own game. These are skills that are so important that you see fading away in this internet, type of thing with the iPads and the phones. The relationships aren't built in the same way. We don't know how to socialize. So for me, there's so much that's important with this street soccer. And when we talk about Malcolm Gladwell and the 10,000 hour rule, that we can talk all we want about that, whether I think that's relevant. But here's what I'll tell you is, at 14 years old, if a kid's played 14,000 hours of street soccer, that cannot be replicated by any coach. Sorry. That is key to developing great players right there.
Right. So let me ask you a question before you move on then. Because I grew up on picking our own teams. We call it a different thing. Now it's being called free play. We call it pick against a first pick, in my young days. And the same thing, Marcus. We get together and we say whoever said pick against the first pick is the one that gets the first choice. So so they pick a team and go on. And we played. We never had a coach. We were never taught how to pass a ball in my days playing. It was more just, I just say, free play, right? Do you think that the youngsters nowadays are being overwhelmed by this, as you said, all these things on the internet, and the coach wants to show his worth and his knowledge? You think you're of that opinion, right?
Yeah. Let me tell you, I'm terrible. I'm terrible. I look at the Coach's Voice, this new website out with all these English pro academy sessions, and it's so robotic. It's so mechanical to me. Yeah. Coach is basically Jesus in a sweatsuit with a whistle. And I'm like, for me, give me a much more unstructured environment than that. And you'll see, I'm going to get into this a little more, but I'm the type of coach that, listen, I want to go to training with some ideas of what I'm going to do. But if during the first exercise, I say, you know what, we need to go a different direction today because this is what this is the way I feel, I'm going to go that different direction. If I see the kids walk onto the field and I had some warm up planned and they look really low in energy, I might say, you know what, forget it. I'm not doing the warm up that I thought I was going to do because they look low in energy. I'm going to make it super competitive and super physical to get these kids ready because they don't look ready to me right now. So I want to be able to change like that and in real time. I don't want to have to stick to a script that is part of a monthly plan and a weekly plan and all these types of things. Listen, this slide here is about environments, right? And I think that we might get to slides about donor sports. And so
the donor sports are here.
Yeah. So there's a big value in all versions of sports. So I use American arena football here as an example. If you're a quarterback in arena football, it's like football shrunk into 20% of a real field. So the quarterback has to make crazy decisions at super fast speeds. And what happens is they gain a superior intelligence when they get back onto the real field with more space. It's the same thing with box lacrosse in Canada. When they play box lacrosse and they go onto a regular lacrosse field, everyone could pick out the guy who played box lacrosse because his stick handling skills are so good. So when we look at that next slide about constraint with Neymar and there's Neymar, there's Ozil, listen, beach soccer, Ronaldinho would say, I take touches on the grass at Barcelona that nobody understands how I take because I learned those touches on the sand. Neymar, till 14 years old, only played futsal. Ozil, I told you about it. He said, every penetrating ball I hit in soccer where people think it's so good, I learned it because the ball couldn't go out of bounds in the cage that I played on against bigger and stronger and faster guys. For 4 hours a day, he played in that. So those are, I will call futsal a donor sport, beach soccer a donor sport, cage soccer a donor sport to the actual 11v11 game of soccer, all coming into the big picture of increasing soccer intelligence and player IQ. That is a big part of my methodology. I would encourage that as much as possible to as a player. If I was a player, I would play everything. So I screwed this up. So basically, this big 7 is the same as the 5, but I added two things.
I realized that. That's why I kept it. I just wanted to.
So we went from 7 to 5. This is bigger than the 5, Vin. Variability, and that's a massive thing. Like, you always want variability in training because you're forcing kids to think differently and come up with different solutions. So, and the other thing was, as a coach, and this was Cruyff to Guardiola, who would say, listen, take the ball and go sit on it and watch practice. Stop inserting yourself. And I really feel that is a major thing. Like, don't feel like you have to validate yourself by constantly going in and make coaching points. Sit back and really take a look at what's happening. And then you could come in. Because if what you're going to say and what you're going to point out is really important, it can usually be done in like 5 seconds. And then get back to sit down again. I mean, this is different though. Like, I mean, you could get a group of players who, I've had groups where I had to almost be a cheerleader at time, because every time I wasn't a cheerleader, it would break sync. I find higher level players who come from good playing experiences, they don't need that. They come with their own motivation.
Okay, let me see. Let's move on then. That you spoke about this earlier.
Yeah, that is simply. Listen, I used to get a lot of guys from Red Bull Brazil, right? And I would ask them, I'd say, what would you do every single day when you're in Brazil? And they said, listen, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have a lot of technology. And our parents knew that we would be safe on the street with each other playing soccer. They played for 4 to 6 hours a day. And that added up to 14,000 hours. I mean, that's massive. That is about culture, though, Vin. So if you have to figure out, that's not realistic for everybody, right? We don't always grow up in Brazil in this sort of an atmosphere against great players and this and that. So how do you make that work in your environment? And that's a whole nother conversation for each individual coach in their environment.
All righty. All right. So now let's getting into more closer to your methodology and your.
So I mean, when we look at this like a soccer culture, right? And again, we use Brazil. If you're in a soccer culture, your mom's wearing the jersey, it's on TV, you're immersed in this thing 24/7, and that total immersion is going to be the fastest way to increase your ability.
Okay, so we have so this year 24/7 exposure to the game is an important thing that you're saying. Gives you ideas that you observe a lot of good players. Coaches.
So there's something to be said about completely immersing yourself in a soccer culture, right? So there's things that you learn. So I'll give you an example. In Iraq, like the U.S. soldiers who were on their 3rd tour of duty could say to you, "Don't walk down this street. There's an explosive device," but they wouldn't be able to tell you why they knew it. They just knew it. The guys on the 1st tour of duty could not say that. They were always wrong. And no one could explain why. And it's only about being immersed in that environment. Your subconscious mind starts to put things together and starts to become very intelligent because that was your environment you're living in. So for me, immersion is a really good thing.
Okay. No, this is one I found interesting. Prescriptive coaching.
So this is the way most people do it is, hey, what's wrong with my team? And if we want to go farther, can we really scratch through the data and find data to prove that our team is lacking something, whatever it is? And then can we create coaching sessions to fix my team? And for me, I like to stray away from what's wrong and then let me try to figure out how I can make sessions to go fix it. I would much rather look at the whole game of soccer as one really complex thing and not try to separate it into pieces. And I really believe that. I think that's really, really important.
I agree with you wholeheartedly there. Doctor's visit.
So it's funny with the key performance indicators, like everybody talks about KPIs now, right? So a
Everybody
lot
talks
of people go like, say, I'm going to go to the doctor, right? And I'm going to say, Jesus, my back hurts. And the doctor's going to say, hey, well, why don't you, take this heating pad, take these pills, muscle relaxers. But maybe that's not the issue at all. Maybe it's that your hip flexors are tight and it's making your lower back hurt, right? So now you're getting prescriptive, medicine for something that's not even the root of the problem. And I find this the truth in soccer so many times, like, oh, we don't get enough shots. We need to shoot more. Well, really, is that really what the problem is? You need to look at this in a much broader perspective. Maybe you guys just can't hold the ball that well and you don't create enough scoring opportunities. Right. And maybe it's not your shooting. And I think that soccer is such a complex game. Well, what if the team was sitting with 10 men in a low block? Does that mean that, how did that affect the game? And what was your formation? And what were the weather conditions? Like for me, the KPIs it's hard for me to take data to point me in a definite direction. I don't know if you remember back in the day the winning formula by Charles Hughes about direct football. Yes. And I'm like, the whole thing was nonsense. It was based on a false premise that goals are scored in less than 5 passes. And I was never a believer in stuff like that. So I think you have to be very, very careful about analyzing and just running every session like I'm going to fix a problem instead of having a big development plan, of how am I going to develop these players over a longer period of time. That's more important to me.
And that's why I was saying that your ideas to me, Hughes was one of my first I think books that I took up. One of them, and yes. I buy into that. What's your thought on this game analysis? I see where you're at. What's your thought on the game analysis?
So I mean, game analysis is fine. Like this is really hard. So like I'll give you an example. So you watch the MLS final, and that was Seattle, I believe, against Columbus. So 2 goals to the back post, and in my opinion, the one of them, the right back didn't get back. Another one they might have overshifted, and the reality is this. How many times did Seattle in a season go over unit defending, team defending? Hey, everybody, shift to the left, get your shape. All these I don't think those training sessions mean anything. Me as a coach, I'll do those training sessions once, twice, but then the guys already understand space. They already understand how to move as a unit. That doesn't take much. I guarantee you, if that wasn't the MLS final, those guys would be on the training field working on defensive shape, the back four, the defensive center mids, all that stuff. Would it fix the problem? No. In my opinion, what the problem was this, in my opinion, the center backs never scanned to see where the right back was, never scanned over his shoulder to see if there was somebody running into that space. It was a breakdown in soccer intelligence, because everybody's eye was focused on the ball with the winger. Also, that right back, the second goal, he was way too far forward, and they didn't have good possession of the ball. He just went too far forward. He should have read that play better and been back. So here's my point. I would have taken the 2 center backs and had them play center mid maybe once a week with the U19s so they get in the habit of scanning more and more. I would have made the right back play center back in one of those in one of the games as well, so he could feel that what it's like to have to control a right back. And those are the type of things that I look at from a different lens. I look at it as in a soccer intelligence thing, not I'm going to fix my back four. This is bigger than that.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned scanning. I think that's an area that we don't, some coaches don't really concentrate on. Whether it's because they don't know about the topic, or they just ignore that, which I think is, if you're looking at, I was just saying to a player a couple of weeks ago, that look at the big team, look at the top teams. Even before they receive the ball, they're checking out 5, 6, 7, 8 times around them. to see what's happening. And you raised that, I had to mention that because that is an area I think that we have to start concentrating on now.
So that, for me, scanning is part of positional play.
Yes.
So you want to be in between lines and in between players. And
right.
you need a current picture of what's all around you 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got to add to scanning, we got to add correct body orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Is your body in the correct shape to receive the ball before you get it? And those things put together make for a team like Spain, right?
Yes, definitely. Earlier on, Marcos, we were talking about a topic, and you said the neuroscience, right? Now, I want you to speak to let me get the proper slide here. This topic here. I think you mentioned ecological approach when I asked about neuroscience, if I'm correct.
Yeah. So there's two approaches to understanding intelligence in sports. One is a neuroscience approach where basically, there's perception action coupling. I perceive something and then I have to couple the cues together, and I do that in my subconscious mind, and then I can act quickly, right? But then there's an ecological approach where I'm not putting things together. I am in constant attunement. I'm in constant feedback loop with the environment. I'm not putting things together. I'm part of that feedback loop. The more that you play and the more experience you have, the more attuned to that environment you become. So it's not like you're doing mathematical equations when you're playing. Xavi could be, going to the left. He's going to pass, and someone blocks that pass, so he immediately goes a different direction. He's not solving problems in his head. He is just absolutely reacting to the environment, and that is knowledge, and that's being attuned to the environment. And that's more where my approach is leading towards, is that ecological approach. So, how does that make sense in my methodology? For me, it, again, game realistic, game based, and then you don't have to worry about it with a lot of variability. Coaches don't have to really be too concerned about the science behind it if your training is game realistic, has variability, game based. And I think when you look at training exercises and you look at what coaches are doing on the field, you have to ask yourself, is this going to actually change game behavior? If it's not going to change game behavior, why are you doing it? Yes, you can have supplemental exercises, which I have, but like at a certain point, Vin, how much is it going to change game behavior if if it's a line drill, if you kids just going to the corner and crossing the ball? Like, what's the purpose of it? Is there anything that they're picking up? So I would look at each and every exercise and really ask myself that.
And it fits right into the next topic that you want to discuss, and it's learning by interacting with the environment. I think that's an important one. Right?
So this one is, I think this is quite interesting, Vin, and it's not always a perfect segue, because and we'll just take this surfer for example. Surfing is not playing soccer. I get it, but a surfer learns to surf by surfing. A yogi learns yoga by doing a yoga routine. I was talking to a NASCAR driver who was a really good NASCAR driver, and I was shocked to learn it's too expensive for them to practice. He literally just does his races, and that's it. And that's when he learns. I mean, it's kind of dangerous, right? But so everything that they need is already there. So the surfer, if he wants to work on the positioning of his back leg to maybe mess around with his balance on the surfboard, that's what he does. And the feedback that he gets from the wave is what he's actually learning from. There was a time I was in, so I love interviewing people from different, martial arts to race car drivers, you name it. So I interviewed a guy who was a top guy in Aikido, the martial art where they throw people around. And I said, well, what is your practice? He's like, well, we do the same thing every day. And I said, well, how does that possibly effective? He says, well, every 5 minutes we switch partners. So you could have a guy 6'5", and the next time a guy 5'2", 5 minutes later, and it's a completely different experience because the center of gravity, the strength, this and that. So there's complete variability there, and it is obviously representative. So for me, I just think that by dissecting soccer into these isolated movements, I'm going to work with my winger and my striker, and this is all I'm going to do. I question how valuable that is after a certain extent. I understand if you want to show them the, you know.
And sorry, and you kind of sum it up with the last statement there, whole over the parts.
Yes. That's really what I'm taking is whole over the part a lot. And this could bring us into the discussion, though, Vin, of tactical periodization is really isolating parts. And I love tactical periodization. I think that he was brilliant for making it up. But Victor Freyd and I share a lot of, I mean, I give him a ton of credit. I personally wouldn't follow it, and it's like followed by every single pro club in the world. Like people swear this is how you have to run your team.
Yes,
I'm left out of that conversation because I actually don't see how that's useful overall in development, and I would question a lot of things. Like if all you're ever going to do is play right back in every exercise and every drill. I don't know. I think that's limiting in your ability to grow as a player.
Yeah, because the fundamentals of the game saying, okay, if you're playing right wing back and you're overlapping fullback, right? When you get into midfield, now you have to adapt the fundamentals of the winger. So I agree. I agree that type of approach too. Okay, you have the fundamentals of a fullback. You know, and then you get into midfield. The fundamentals are different going into that, or how you approach that particular role. And so I tend to agree, you know.
And then we didn't even talk about we're talking about senior teams, but at the youth level,
right?
You got to be careful. You got to let players explore possibilities and solutions all over the field.
And I would tend to agree with you there.
Yeah.
Let us look at you have one about what coaches can't possibly do. Let's check that one out.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So this is another one about the whole over the parts. So there's a couple things here. Is when I was sitting in on a conversation about a training session over the winter, and they're talking about our team moved the ball through the back four too slow, and they make a whole training session on it. And for me, it's silly. I mean, it's silly. If you want to learn how to move the ball and exploit time and space and move it quicker, all your possession and rondos, all your exercises do that. You don't really need to have a whole training session on that. And if you're going to have a whole training session on that, maybe there's only 2 players that are going to benefit. What is the rest of the team going to get out of that? So I think we need to switch our views and say, can we make training sessions where every player can get exactly what they need out of the training session, not what the coach needs to give 1 or 2 players. And it's impossible for the coach to coach all 22 players in a training session. It's impossible to give that to them.
Yeah. And this is where your variability comes in then.
Listen, we're talking about repetition without repetition. It's funny. So you told me this story before the show about kicking the ball and teaching the kid how to pass in 3 steps, right? And I think those things are obviously, when you're dealing with a novice player, those things are really important. But at a certain extent, once a kid understands a technique, the whole rest of their career is about providing environments where they can do that technique with in a million different situations, and that's the repetition. To sit up there and put 2 cones down and have a kid do a push pass who already knows how to hit a push pass, now you're almost wasting the team's time. You're wasting the kid's time, in my opinion, because there's no decisions there. There's no variation. There's no nothing. This is an interesting one as well, is that everybody's different. So techniques that are gonna, there's no one way to coach a technique. Like, this is the perfect technique. This is how you do it. Every kid is different. Every body is different. And, you know, if we're talking about ultimately, you know, certain techniques are going to work for certain guys and not for other guys. So as coaches, we do have to understand that as well.
So you mentioned decision making at the top, right? And that, I think that's one of the crucial area of the game that we have to ensure that players, you know, get a lot of chance to do. Your sessions should include a lot of decision making.
Yes,
when you have their game representative variability realistic.
Yeah. It's the same message, right? Going over and over again here. Game representative variability, realistic decision making. Now we could talk more about that. Like, it should be at, you know, it should be at a high tempo, at speed, under pressure, right? Because the in today's game, it's a pressing game, and kids need to be able to figure out solutions to problems at high speeds in tight places. You have to be able to work the ball out of tight areas. If you don't have any solutions to work it out of tight areas, what's the solution? Kick the ball 70 yards.
I agree. There's the other, I think I read on the next slide coming up. I like, can you just go into this a bit? Because it is saying something about coaching on the day, right?
Yeah. So I don't believe that you need, so my methodology is a whole, in my opinion. So do I need to come into every training session with all these objectives? I don't. I don't need to have all these objectives for me. And obviously that there's certain things that are fundamental, like our principles of play. You know, we want to be in between players. We want to be in between lines. We want to have good body orientation when we receive the ball. We want to scan. Obviously, you know, we want to use width. But those are things that I'm talking to you about, honestly. Again, words don't mean that much. The kids have to experience this, and they have to, because they're not thinking about what you told them. So by going through these exercises day after day after day, this becomes second nature. And I laugh, like, when I look at Toronto FC, who had 16 attacking principles of play. I don't even know if I can name 16 attacking principles of play. And there's no way that when Giovinco got the ball, he was thinking of one of those attacks. He doesn't care. Right. Players were playing in the moment. And that's my point. A lot of this stuff is for coaches to, exactly. I don't want to say for coaches to justify things. And I don't think that objective stuff is, you know, I know if we were on a federation course, you'd have to have all that down. You'd have to have, you know, key performance indicator. For me, I hate to say it's nonsense, but I'm not using it because that's me. But, you know.
And that's why I've said at the top of the thing, that you're open-minded, you have your own opinion, not that you're opinionated, you know, because sometimes you say opinionated in a negative way. I like the fact that you can challenge the status quo because every now and again you have someone coming 4-2-3-1. It used to be 4-5-1, 4-2-3-1, 4-1-4-1. You know, all kind of formation, and they're coming up with these things, and sort of can distract you if you think otherwise. Because when I played a double M formation, and when you look at the double M formation, reality is a 4-3-4-3 formation of box four. You know, so it's just one of those things. More things change, more remain the same.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's funny. I mean, what is a formation really? A formation is before the ball is kicked. Once the ball is kicked, the formation is transitions from, you know, from attack to defense to transition. And the difference between positions is 10 yards. Any formation, you know, player's position is 10 yards. It's a different formation. So I would gear towards just general principles of, in attack, if we lose the ball, are we balanced to handle a counterattack? Very simple, right? And those are, for me, it's about intelligence, not really about some magic formation, because, you know, formations aren't going to solve it.
So let's finish up on this part of it by looking at a statement that's here. I think this is done from research, right? Top level soccer players in Germany spent more time in unstructured soccer play as kids compared to players at a level below them.
Yeah. So
that is
yeah, basically it's saying street ballers win the day. That's basically what it's saying. If you're going to spend more time in those 10,000 hours playing street ball, you're going to be better off. And there is also another study that in Germany saying that a lot of the Bundesliga players are multiple sport athletes as kids. Mm-hmm. And there is, I believe there is a really good benefit to that, to understanding space and time and strategy and things like that. That is a good thing as well.
Yeah, I believe in the multiple sports approach. Definitely, it develops other areas of skill set. Now we're going to move into an interesting topic here, right? Developing soccer brain, right?
Yeah.
Now,
so
go ahead and tell me and explain this, because this is really deep into your own methodology and your coaching school.
So again, if we look at, I laughed. The English DNA plan, right? And I know that the England is doing well, and I hope they win the Euros and all that. And they're like, well, we had this English DNA plan, and it's made us into what we are. Like, it really works. And I look at the English DNA plan and just take the word England out of there and put Spain, because it literally just sounds like a positional football document, which England is not. And it doesn't even make sense to compare that to their national team. It makes no sense. Here is what makes sense to me. England, 14% of the current players in the EPL come from a place called the Proving Grounds, which are basically hard courts for small-sided soccer, where they let them play all night. It's open 24/7, and it's the local neighborhood guys. And that's your unstructured play. That's your neighborhood pride. I listened to one of the guys from Arsenal the other day talking about in his neighborhood, they had 3 fields. If you weren't good enough, you play on the 3rd field. If you got better, you get promoted. If you were a top player, that was your neighborhood pride. That's who you were.
Yeah.
That's more important than any English DNA plan.
So you're developing the soccer brain. I remember some time ago, I think it was what's his name? It was actually a hockey coach.
Yes, a long time ago, a Russian one.
Yeah, but so we move. I like that, because this is also saying that this also refers back to futsal. You can look at that futsal also. Playing these top players.
All the donor sports of soccer, it can relate to.
Sport. Yes, yeah. You mentioned Ozil at the top of your story, and then I think you have some good facts on him. The importance of playing in diverse environments is training your brain also. Speak to that area with Ozil for me.
So when we talk about cognitive soccer stuff, and there's a guy in Belgium who's kind of really known for the cognitive soccer stuff. I'll just put this point blank. When you see guys like holding up different colors, you see the flashing lights, and you scan and you yell orange, you yell blue. Honestly, for me, it means nothing.
Yeah.
That right there is simply getting good at a drill, because there's no game cues, there's no game-changing behavior. Maybe it's getting you to scan your shoulder a little bit. Good, good. But the reality is, the Mesut Ozil story is game representative. That's a donor sport, and now that's really how you develop your soccer brain. People can talk about all sorts of different technologies and simulators is going to be a big one in the future, Vin. You're going to see about 3D, real game realistic simulators. And if you can get to the point where you can make a game realistic simulator where you have to make real decisions in real time at speed, and maybe you can use your feet like you would with one of those, crazy video games. At that point, I would say maybe there's some real value in it, because your brain doesn't know the difference between real and fake. And some of the other simulators, I mean, it's not fair to use an airline simulator, and flying a plane is different than playing in a dynamic, chaotic soccer game. But this all comes back to intelligence, solving problems, getting unique skill sets. Because let's be the reality is this. I mean, I had this Brazilian right back for me, and he only played beach soccer. Listen, you would go to try to press him. His skill set was tremendous. He would just dribble by everybody. And he learned it on the beach. And that, again, had nothing to do with a coach. So that's why I'm just really harp on these environments in player development.
Yeah. Then we move on to this here, which I found there's one, let's call it a statement here by this player that says, on Arsenal versus Barcelona, the difference between them and us is we have more players who think before they play. This is quicker. And this is something that I think we have a problem sometimes in the Caribbean, Marcos, because our playing surface is so poor.
Yeah.
That we tend to have our heads down, play with our heads down a lot because we are looking at the bounce. We have to get in line quickly. And you can hardly scan, you can hardly turn and look away because the ball can go anywhere when it gets, coming on its way to you. But this still yet, this is a profound statement here.
Yeah. I mean, in a way that's good because, much like the Ghanaian players that I've coached, they have a great ability to control the ball based upon their playing experience on some of those fields.
Fields, right.
Yeah, I think that lends itself well. I would see that as a positive. But as far as what you're talking about, to really teach a positional play in a terrible field would be more challenging. There's no doubt that it would be more challenging because you have to take up different body positions to control a ball that could bounce over your foot, right? And body orientation is a big part of success in positional play because you have to be able to play one touch, two touch. And if it takes you three, touches to control the ball and your head's down, it's going to be an issue.
And I want you to, I know you're limited in time too, so we're trying to get as much in as possible. I want you to talk me through this slide, right? Play of the future. Because I thought we are in the future already.
Yeah, no, we are, right? So faster speeds. So basically this slide is simply about, because everybody presses so much and because everybody now is so athletic, are your players technical enough? Can they think fast enough? And now technical is one thing. You have to perform that technique at speed. And it has to be done with a solution in mind. And that's not easy. And you'll see, like in college soccer, Vin, it's often like ping pong, right? Because they just bypass the midfield because everyone's just pressing each other and killing each other. And nobody's good enough to really put their foot on the ball and control the game because they don't have the ability to overcome the athletic. And for me, it's easy to teach kids how to press. And if they are athletic, it's even better. But it's very difficult. And for me, it's a long-term process to get teams to be able to work that ball to beat teams that press who are super athletic. And that, for me, is the player of the future. And for me, everyone talks about the physical. The physical is nonsense to me. Like, if the secret was bench pressing and squatting, everybody would win the World Cup. That has nothing to do with it. For me, I would rather make sure your players are technical and make sure that you're working on decision making at speed under high pressure. Because for me, that's the key. I actually would prefer a much leaner upper body, and I wouldn't want the kids to do too much weight training at all, because to run soccer is one of those sports where, yes, your lower body, your glutes, you have to be able to have strong glutes and quads and hamstrings. But you have to change direction. If you are not flexible and have weight on your upper body, you can't change direction because your center of gravity is thrown off. So for me, all the weight training talk, that goes on the side for me. Core strength, and after the core strength, I want you to be flexible. And that's for me why Ryan Giggs played so long. Look at all the muscle that Cristiano Ronaldo dropped, and look at the longevity of his career. He's gotten a lot skinnier and a lot leaner because I think he learned.
You have a question here that intrigues me. Are you changing behavior in the game or just in the exercise?
Yeah, again, is your exercise game representative? Is it really going to add to the kid's IQ, or is it just an exercise to have them do the exercise and get better at doing the exercise? So that, for me, a coach really needs to ask themselves about their training sessions. What is this really beneficial, and why? And if they can justify it, great. I'm never going to say they're wrong if they can justify it. But if you can't justify it, then I'm not sure why you're doing it.
I agree there. I'm saying that if you're talking about the play of the future, I mean, focusing one of the areas, scanning to identify. That's what you said before. Real skills, knowing when to apply scanning. That's the key right there. Real skills, knowing when to apply scanning. That's an area I think that is worth talking about with any coaching course that are and coaches that are trying to influence play. Now, let us move on to another. I think this is a final slide.
I think we talked about this representative learning design. Yep.
Yeah. So let us go now to another era before we finish up. I think this is our last area. Game model construction. This is something that is trending right now to Marcus.
So let's take the word affordance, right? Affordance is what is available to you. And the affordances could be, Vin, if I'm dribbling the ball towards you, if I get too close to you, I can't pass to my teammate because you're going to steal it. Like affordances are always changing. Now, affordances could also be, I could be an incredibly fast guy. I could be very skilled. I have different abilities than somebody else. So as a coach, say you're going to put together a game model. I'm going to say, Vin, you get to have Lionel Messi on your team. Well, do you even know what Lionel Messi is capable of in all these different situations on the field? Well, probably not. Like, you don't know what he's going to do. The guy's amazing. So if your game model is to tell Lionel Messi, hey, every time you get the ball, I either want you to hit it out wide or whatever, right? Well, you can't do that because he has some tremendous abilities that you can't even comprehend. So when you're making your game model, you have to try to really understand who are you coaching and what age are you coaching at as well. Because if you have too rigid a game model with younger players, they never get a chance to go and explore on the field, and they need to understand what works, what doesn't work, and give them a little bit of freedom. And that's really important. As you get to the older age groups, you have a professional team, a college team. Okay, now your game model could be a little stricter. But the reality is that, again, the coach doesn't have to have all the answers. What if the players have better solutions on the field than the coach? You don't want to limit that. So, and my opinion is this. I personally use the outline of Guardiola's positional grid. And I use it for general ideas. On top of the box is usually a one-touch fast area because that's where most defenders are located. In the corners near the corner flag, it's actually a very low percentage area. I don't encourage hitting crosses from that area. The half spaces on the edge of the box are great areas because you can hit penetrating balls in, and you could play the ball out wide, and you could shoot far post. So my point is this: with game model stuff, I like to have a flexible game model where it still gives structure to the play. But if a player has the ability to dribble in the fast area and it doesn't want a one touch, that's fine. That's that player. He has the freedom to do that, and he doesn't have to worry about me yelling from the sideline, what are you doing? And that's then, so this is positional versus self-organized, this slide, Vin, and this is basically for me, because soccer is a chaotic game, I want kids to do exercises where they have to figure it out themselves to create their own solutions. And then some of my exercises are positional, where I tell them this is where you're going to play in this exercise, and we go for it. So I make sure I have both compared to just positional. I want them to be able to have their own skill set where they can interchange positions, figure out their own positions, and have this freedom and creativity.
Okay. Now we move on to this is just a one slide. I don't think that take much discussion, but it's interesting. I think you mentioned this before. Development must fit your environment.
I gave you the island. I gave you the Caribbean there.
Yes. Yeah. I see that. Yeah. I mean, this is must fit your environment, and I'm 100% behind that statement.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things. It's not just the physical environment. It's the social structure. It's the history. It's everything. So I think that's something that has to be a conversation with every single soccer club you work with.
Yeah, and it leads us into these larger, more diverse countries.
Yes.
And then
And this, I kind of put this slide in for you, Vin, because I don't have the greatest understanding of the Caribbean, but you and I talked about, any country like England or the United States or France that are very diverse, they could select guys that are all different types of skill sets and
right.
It's very hard to have a national style of play. In the Caribbean, because there's a lot of islands, I know that, and a lot of national teams. I don't even know where I would begin with that, and I don't know. I just threw that out there to you because I think it's kind of interesting.
It is because we have a lot of times when I see even FIFA or one of those some other countries that presenting to the smaller islands, and it has no relationship to the culture and the development process. You can take something from it. But when you're comparing a small island like for Anguilla, for instance, who was like, I don't think they have reached 30,000 people there, right? I think it's 14 or 15,000 people. Now, when you're looking at a country like that, and you're trying to compare them with how you develop football in England, in the UK and Belgium, I think you're going out of whack right there. It's not relative to what they're doing there. So I agree. I'm thankful for putting that in because it's relevant to our situation in the Caribbean and some places in Africa, I can imagine.
I mean, there is a nice part about having a small area, though. Like if you're dealing with one island, you have control over it. All this stuff, to be fair, Vin, I threw in some of this stuff that we've talked about. The small, the medium, the large. We kind of went through some of these.
Yes, we went through these already.
Yeah, I think I have about 10 minutes left. I don't know if you have questions and stuff too.
I'm not seeing any coming up yet. I just see comments really, but let us look because we can move. I think we can go over these areas because you spoke to these areas already.
Sure.
And there's I'll never look at anything else. I can't finish up. I have to finish up with this slide. The decision making.
Yeah.
I think it's something that we shouldn't gloss over. When we talk about decision making, I think you have two slides that refers to it.
Yeah.
And the concept of position player work into the game-based training exercises. I think that it coming on a positional play and decision making, which is integral to just about everything that we do. In the game, I think that's where we should move towards now. Decision making. This is what I find that in the lower tier, that's one of the areas that affect us the most, Marcus. I don't know your take on that.
Well, so it's interesting how we look at positional play, right? I mean, for me, it's all about decision making, but positional play in its true form is we're going to work out of our, defensive third, using the goalkeeper as a plus player, work into the middle third. In the middle third, we're going to have hopefully a plus number again if we drag in an overload, switch it to the other side of the field, get into the attacking third. Hopefully we could get even numbers in the attacking third if possible. And then if we lose the ball, we counter press. Usually it takes 15 to 25 passes to get from building all the way into the attacking third. We look for superiority. So in positional play, superiorities can be the position of the player. It could be the number of players. It could be a skill set. It could be, you have a great dribbler against a defender who can't handle them. It could be a height advantage, maybe as your striker is taller than the two center backs. Yes. So whatever that superiority is in positional play, we try to exploit that. But for me, I'm not a pure positional play guy. I don't believe you have to play out of the back. I don't believe you have to build through the thirds. I think if you have a forward who's ultra fast and their center back is slow and you want to send a long ball for a foot race for a one-on-one with the keeper, I'm all for skipping lines. Yes. Are you going to do it every time? No, but if that's a superiority, take advantage of it. So again, as with everything that I talk about, I'm flexible. But I do believe, the principles of making sure that your players have a position on the field that they cover, make sure that they're in between players, in between lines, make sure their body orientation is correct. All these things help us move the ball. And basically, obviously every time you get the ball, the objective is to score. So how do you go through that decision-making process? If you can score, you score. If you can't, what's the next objective and the next objective? But these things have to be automatic with the players. And I almost feel like they don't need to be explained so much. It needs to become automatic where they get into your training sessions, and your training sessions are game representative. So they figure out how to score, how to make it work. And that's why that's kind of the whole way that this goes in all my exercises.
And this is all connected to your methodology.
Yes. So I know we're going to mention it, but I do offer a course, and in that course, I have highlights of 20 minutes of all my exercises that I do in small area, medium area, large area, how that fits in. Then I have breakdowns of film of my team and when they're actually playing, so you could see how it transfers over and the positional play and so forth.
And I had a question here, but it's my internet is slowing up. But it has to do with how do your players react to your philosophy? That's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny because I have players from all around the world. So if it's normally the Germans want to know every rule and every reason, every objective, and they're not happy unless they know everything. The Brazilians, they're happy to do anything. They love it if we don't have as many rules. They love it if we have more freedom. So it's more about getting the cultures on the same page, and that is, and I'm more leaning towards a training session that's less structured compared to where some of the guys are coming from so much structure. It takes them a little while to get used to, not quite as much structure.
Yeah, and I just say we are there. We have it. I want you to just give me a quick overview. We have about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Your school, your soccer school, the Dibernardo Soccer School.
Listen, you sound Italian to me. It's beautiful. Yeah, no, listen, it's an online. Basically, that soccer school is just a link to my online course. And that online course is really comprehensive. It's packed with material, and a lot of it is video, tons of video on there. And then I have PDF files. I have, you name it. There's a ton of information. It basically gives you a methodology from U6 all the way up to senior. And there's everything from teaching the game model 7v7, 9v9, 11v11 through positional rondos, all the way to my own methodology. So it's really all there, the constraint-based training. And, it's not, for me, you don't have to follow everything I do, but I really think that if you go through it, you'll be able to choose pieces that fit your environment really well. And you're going to be like, this might make sense for my environment.
And I tell you something, Marco, that's the reason why I was drawn to you based on I've heard your conversations, because you have a lot of these people who put out coaches who put out these things, and it's more geared towards making money
Yeah.
than giving an option. It's like, oh, this is the way. And as soon as Barcelona wins, oh, play that Barcelona, play the Barcelona way, and is that they're telling you if you and how many people win playing the Barcelona way? How many players do you have that can play the Barcelona way? It's simply not so, not true. And I've always, from the first time I listened to you, and I heard, and I said when I started that you have your opinions, and you not that you're moving away from traditional coaching and training, but you have your own way of looking at it, and that's what I like, because I myself, I think I'm the same way. I step back sometimes, and not because you have won 10 Premier Leagues means I have to follow you. I must know what I have available to me. Who am I coaching? Who's in front of me? Mm-hmm. That is some of the things that I have to ask myself. So I'm really, really pleased when I hear you mention, you have a course. You can pick out from it what's relevant, or maybe this can help you. Not everyone can run those at a certain time, age group, at level. So I really, really, really think that is something that we must take a step back and, look at what we have to do to make our players better, or make ourselves better coaches. So I've indicated your website there for the school, soccer school. I'm hoping that everyone that's on here, that's listening, that's viewing, and other people will access this on YouTube little down the road, because this will be available on YouTube for quite some time. So you can go and take a look at it again. That's I'm always, it's a tongue twister for me sometimes. Dibernardo Soccer School.com is where you can find Marcus's information. Marcus actually will be collaborating with and I have to give my association a plug. Marcus will be collaborating with the Caribbean Football Coaches Association, offering this course online at reduced cost. So you can check that out in a couple of weeks, where you'll have access. In the meantime, you can go to www.dibernardosoccerschool.com. You got it. Every time I go for it, I smile on your face. It comes on my face too.
That's awesome. But yeah. Vin, you gotta drag me down the Caribbean at some point. I gotta come down. I want to check it out.
We definitely gonna bring you here, man. It's all in the making. Trust me. We're just making. We are through the Coaches Association, which I'm a part of. We are gonna be bringing coach education to all our coaches in the Caribbean, and I want to also mention that you have written a couple of books, right? That they can. The name is unique. I don't think you're gonna find another Marcus Dibernardo on there. So everything written there is going to be you. I want to thank you for coming up. First of all, let me thank my guests for coming in and be a part of this conversation. I am hoping that you came away with some interesting ideas, and I think that Marcus brought to us today. It's his ideas. He's the first one to tell you these are his ideas. He's not telling you this is cast in stone. What Marcus is saying, that you be your own person to look and identify what he is putting forward. How can it help you? Is it relevant to you? It makes sense to you, And if you feel otherwise, you can always hit him up, and challenge him. If you go to the website, give me your email address, because my computer is giving me a hard time to give me your email address.
CoachDibernardo@gmail.com.
Right.
And remember, Vin, you got to tell everybody, right? My son's Bayesian, right? So this is important.
Let me say that. That's right. Marcus is a part of the Caribbean, not just his son, but his wife is from Barbados. His son represents Barbados. So hopefully down the road you hear him representing Barbados. And I know Marcus is preparing him as it is as we speak. So let us and I'm gonna root for him. I know you were upset about that. I know he was upset about the score. The 8.
He was. He was upset.
He was upset. But that goes to show, work has to be done there, and hopefully, with our coaching and through the Coaches Association, with us doing and through OTS Live, we'll be able to expose coaches to, a higher education and get them to a level where we can compete as teams in the region. Marcus, it was a pleasure having you on. Trust me.
Thanks so much, Vin. I really appreciate being on, and
Yes.
talk to you soon.
I will talk soon.
All right.
Take care. All right, guys. Thanks for coming on. Take care.